Morning, everyone. Welcome to our 7th event in our Equity in the Workplace series. It's so great to see you all this morning. As always, I'm your host, Sarah Moore, Legal Counsel and Business Development at Benefit Bump. We here at Benefit Bump are super passionate about paid parental leave for all employees, as it's truly a way to stem the tide of health inequities and gender inequities in the United States. Having access to paid parental leave improves maternal physical and mental health, baby's health, parent-child bonding, financial stability for new parents, and breastfeeding outcomes, among many other benefits. It's typically lower paid individuals that lack access to paid leave, which further reinforces the inequities in our society. Joining us today is Vicki Shabo, Senior Fellow, Paid Leave Policy and Strategy at New America, to provide an update on paid leave legislation in the United States, why it's important for all employees to have access to paid leave, and to walk us through the business case supporting paid leave for all. So Vicki, we're very excited for this session with you. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Sarah. And thank you to Scott and to Benefit Bump for having me. This is a critical time for paid leave legislation in the US. And I know the business community and the benefits community has been watching really closely as states have innovated in this area and created new programs and sometimes new issues for you. And also probably watching closely to see what happens as Congress considers this issue as well. So I can put all of that in context in a minute and kind of share what's happening. But before I do that, I will share my screen and just walk through what is paid leave, why do we care, and I don't know if that worked. Did that work? Can you guys see my, okay. You never know. Why is it important? What's the business case and why is this a win-win? First let's define what we're talking about here, because I know there are also other things like paid sick time, earned paid sick time in states and localities. But here we're talking about paid family and medical leave that's to provide or receive care for a new child, a loved one, your own serious health condition, or a wounded service member or certain deployment related needs. The state programs and the federal program, and I would say, best employer practices include all workers, including part-time and full-time workers, and a pathway for contractors or self-employed people to be covered as well. At a wage replacement rate and a maximum benefit level that makes leave taking affordable, especially for lower wage workers, for whom receiving a low percentage of their wages may not be a possible pathway for them, but where receiving 80, 85, 90%, or 100% of their wages might be better. And with employment protections, we know that the Family and Medical Leave Act covers about 56% of workers. It leaves out workers in smaller businesses, those who work part-time, and those who have been on the job for less than a year. And so closing the gap, making sure that those workers are protected as well is critically important for creating the strongest possible and most effective paid leave policy. So where are we now? As I mentioned, FMLA covers about 56% of workers. Many of those who are covered don't have access to paid time and can't afford unpaid time. And in fact, in the most recent data, we've seen that the share of workers that say they can't afford or that they have foregone a leave that they needed has grown pretty considerably over the last several years. And the inability to afford time off without pay is a big driver for that. Some companies are leading, and I'm sure that some of you are among them. Some companies have led. We've seen increases in access to paid family leave over the last 10 years, but those increases are concentrated among higher wage workers. And so you can see here from this graph how access has grown. Among the top decile, it's grown 20 percentage points from 10% to 20% overall for everyone. Among the highest wage workers, we're now up to about 34% of workers with dedicated paid family leave. But among the lowest wage workers, we're still at 5%. And we've only seen a 2 percentage point gain over the last decade. I have much more about this in a blog that's linked to here, and you can have these slides afterwards. So I'm sure many of you know this, but here's a quiz. How many other high wealth countries are like us? None. So we're the only OECD country without paid leave for new moms. We're one of a handful without paid leave for new dads. We're one of 2 without personal sick or medical leave. And we're one of a handful without family caregiving leave as well. So we have an opportunity to change that, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this isn't just about what's right. It's not just about individual employees. There are real costs to the status quo. And here are just a few of them. Women's labor force participation is now at 1988 levels in the US. A lot of this is due to the pandemic, obviously, and we've got to get a couple million women back into the workforce. But the truth is that we were far behind our economic competitors even before the pandemic. And that loss in labor force participation among women is estimated to contribute to about 500 billion loss to the economy. That was pre-pandemic. A new estimate just came out last week to show that it's now around 650 billion that's lost every year in the economy. During the pandemic, about 15% of workers left because of caregiving, 8% left because of a personal health issue. And of course, we now have a whole cadre of new folks who unfortunately are going to have long-term health complications due to COVID-19. In the before times, before COVID, about 1 in 4 women went back to work within 2 weeks of giving birth, in part because they didn't have paid leave and couldn't afford unpaid leave. Overall, workers lose about $300,000 individually in income and retirement savings when they are older and need to care for an aging parent. Families' wages forego about $22.5 billion a year due to inadequate or no paid leave, and the average family loses about $9,500. As we rebuild, we need to deal with chronic unemployment among women and people of color. We need to recognize that 1 in 5 adults currently care for a child and older adults are both. And what we're looking at here is a workforce issue because it is people in the prime of their working lives or on the cusp of the prime of their working lives who do have these multiple caregiving responsibilities. Gen X, millennials, and Gen Z in particular have numerous and growing caregiving responsibilities and are likely to be in that sandwich generation of caring both for an older loved one and for a child. So what do we need? Why do we need to ensure paid leave for all? This is sort of the inverse of what I mentioned before. Increased labor force participation and earnings for women, workforce diversity and inclusion. Women, people of color, and people with disabilities have a lot to contribute to workplaces. We know that companies and publicly traded companies in particular see value to shareholders, to profits. ROI goes up when you have a more diverse workforce. Paid leave is part of that. Greater gender equity at home and at work when men also take leave, which is great for the women in the workforce and women's earnings as well. Improved health outcomes, which businesses obviously have a stake in. Reduced Medicaid costs, less TANF, less SNAP, and other sources of public assistance, which taxpayers have an interest in and is better for people as well. Benefits for businesses, in particular small businesses who may not be able to compete with the kinds of generous benefits that are offered by larger companies and therefore have trouble attracting and retaining talent. And overall economic growth. The inverse of that 500 billion number is McKinsey estimates $2.4 trillion in GDP growth could be gained by correcting gender workplace imbalances if we do that now, and 1.7 trillion according to AARP if we make workplaces inclusive of family caregivers. So I have been working for more than the past decade to build the case and the policy design for a national paid family and medical leave program that guarantees universal equal access for paid leave, gender equity for workers in all size businesses, including full-time, part-time, and independent contractors, comprehensive coverage that's inclusive of the FMLA reasons and duration, the 12 weeks of paid leave to match FMLA, inclusive of all families, recognizing that generations have different kinds of caregiving responsibilities. Families come in all configurations, where siblings, grandparents, grandchildren, chosen family are all people for whom one may need to provide care and for whom workers may be less productive or need to quit if they don't have access to paid leave. It needs to be affordable to use for workers, so benefits that are generous enough that it makes paid leave affordable. Programmatic funding that is sustainable and certain, so that both businesses and workers know what workers have access to and what businesses can expect their workers to have access to. The efficient public administration of a federal program, so benefits are delivered well and quickly and effectively and transparently. A benefits floor that employers can innovate around and build on, so that employers that do want to continue to provide better benefits or more benefits or create new benefits are able to do that. And solutions that help businesses managing absences and return to work, help small businesses navigate having workers out and that sort of thing. For the business case, so often, less recently, but certainly in the past, there's been this sort of tension in thinking that if that paid leave is bad for business. There's a growing business case. I'm sure some of you have your own metrics and your own data, but research shows, as I mentioned before, a case that is rooted in workplace diversity and inclusion, greater retention when workers have access to paid leave, either through a state program or through an employer's own policy, or I should say a public program or employer's own policy, revenue increases, profit increases, a shared load, so that workers who are part of family systems can share the caregiving load equally. One of the things I often hear, from businesses that are offering generous benefits is we're already doing that. So why do we need a public program? Well, your employees more likely than not are parts of families, and they may need to care for a parent or a sibling or a grandparent. And so while your employee might have access to your own benefits, their spouse or their sibling or their parent may not. And that means that actually your employees are doing more of the load. That means you're picking up more of the cost. If we have a public program where everyone has access, there's a greater number of family caregivers that are able to provide care and less burdens on kind of high road folks and less burdens on their employees. Certainty and predictability. So knowing, that there's a federal system means just more stability overall in the ecosystem of benefits and employee access. And then for smaller businesses, I mentioned competition, the ability to compete with larger businesses, having the cost of paid leave offset by a public benefit so that a small business doesn't need to absorb that income shock, which frees up resources. So as I mentioned, shifting now kind of to the landscape, paid leave is on the horizon. It's part of President Biden's Build Back Better agenda. It will be baked into the budget resolution that Congress is expected to pass before they leave town for the August recess. And then the committees, the Finance Committee on the Senate side and the Ways and Means Committee on the House side will start working on bills of the. And the policies that they're looking at right now kind of meet these principles that I laid out before. And it's in the interests of businesses and workers to ensure that these policy principles are met. And so that kind of leads me, I'm talking really fast because I want to make sure we have time for questions. That kind of leads me to opportunities for business leadership. It's been really, really exciting to see individual businesses step up for paid leave over the last several years. When I worked at the National Partnership for Women and Families, we launched a website called advancingpaidleave.org, where we had a coalition of about 100 businesses that supported a national paid leave policy. That's grown now. Paid Leave for the US, Main Street Alliance, the Small Businesses for Paid Leave Coalition have all come together to help generate more and growing business support. So just in the last 6 or 7 weeks, Melinda Gates was featured in a video with other leaders from Levi Strauss and Sun Life Insurance and trying to think of some of the others. Thinks, a small cafe in Delaware, coming together to call on Congress to pass paid leave. That follows on a Business Coalition Week of Action. And this Zoom snapshot here is a video of folks from leaders from Airbnb and Alexis Ohanian, formerly of Reddit, and a small mid-sized company in California called Environmental Science Associates, and some others that I'm forgetting, who met with Speaker Nancy Pelosi to talk about paid leave. And that was part of a number of meetings. Companies like Adobe have been leading the way for a long time, advocating for paid leave. So there's public advocacy, there's education among your peers, there's even sharing your own individual company metrics that show the value of paid leave if you have it. If you're in a state with paid leave, it's talking about the impact of that policy on your company and any of the positive effects that you've seen. There's opportunities to engage employees. We've seen companies like Levi Strauss do that. And there's employees for customer engagement, which we've seen companies like Patagonia do. So I'm going to pause there. But really key takeaways, it's time to end the US's outlier status. This is an individual family issue, a community issue, a business issue, and an economic issue. We need to make this a reality for the 100 million workers that don't have paid leave now. If past is prologue, we haven't seen we've seen some companies step up to provide a business case and evidence. We've seen some states step up to show how paid leave can work. But overall, there are 100 million people left out, people in more than 40 states left out. And we have a window to change things right now. And creating a strong workable policy for everyone will be more likely if businesses are part of conversations about a solution. So I will stop talking and turn off my screen share and answer questions.
Wow, thank you, Vicki. I mean, there's just so much in that presentation, so many good facts and figures. We really appreciate you sharing that with us today. You absolutely covered the pain points of the current paid leave landscape in the US, some good solutions to kind of move beyond that, and then the business case. So lots of, just real quick to wrap up, and then we'll get to Q&A. For us, lots of participants that we serve have access to a healthy amount of paid leave, but they are confused as to how it works. So we simplify that process for them and continue to educate them throughout their growing family life event about resources that they have access to and how their leave works. And so I thank you, Crosby, for sharing our contact information slide. This is really key if you have questions about what we do, or if you'd like to reach out to Vicki about, again, the landscape and how things are moving forward and the business case. We'll follow up with a key takeaway page as well that'll kind of sum up and lay out the items that you covered, Vicki. But we appreciate you sharing all of this with us. It's absolutely an important topic. It's so timely right now. And so I'd love to get to questions. So Kate, thank you for handling our Q&A session.
Absolutely. So for anyone tuning in, if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat section. We have a few that we received ahead of time. And Vicki, this first one that we received, you might have already spoken to a little bit at the end, but just in case you have any thoughts. How can employers support paid leave initiatives in the United States?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways. The one that I would love to see is to help grow the coalition of businesses that are supportive of national public policy. They can do that. They can reach out to me, and I'm happy to help plug them into efforts that I'm working on in coordination with other organizations. Would love to work on op-eds or set up meetings with members of Congress, or help them get linked into efforts like Time's Up's Caregiving Council, or Paid Leave for All's business coalition work, Paid Leave for the US's letter. There are lots of different ways to get engaged in advocacy for a policy and talking about why this matters to business. There's also ways to get engaged, or to engage more quietly in conversations about how policy design would work, and I'd welcome that as well.
All right. So this next question I'm reading to myself, and then I'm already kind of starting to answer, but I'm going to let you answer it, Vicki. Why is caregiving leave so important, and isn't parental leave enough?
Great question. So parental leave is undoubtedly important. It's got effects on, maternal and infant health, well-being for kids. It's linked to less shaken baby syndrome, better educational outcomes, as I said, better maternal health, maternal labor force attachment, and earnings over time. So super, super important. But leave for new parents is only about a quarter of the leaves that are taken every year under the Family and Medical Leave Act. About a fifth of all FMLA leaves are to care for a parent, spouse, or child. And a number of leaves that can't be taken under the FMLA are to care for an extended group of family members. Not a huge number, only a few percent of people who aren't able to take paid leave or take FMLA leave is because the family member they want to care for is outside of the FMLA definition. But family caregiving is a huge and growing need. Our population is aging rapidly, and it used to be that because families were bigger, there were more family caregivers available to care for each older or disabled loved one. Now, so it used to be a ratio of about 6 to 1, 6 people to care for each person who needed care. Now we're at about 3 to 1, or we'll soon be at about 3 to 1. The baby boom is booming. They're getting older, they need care, and there are fewer of the rest of us to take care of them right now. We also have a growing number of people with long-term health issues and kids with special needs who need care. And I guess the last thing I would say is that some companies have done a good job with parental leave. A fewer number have done a good job with caregiving leave, and there's a market gap here, and it's one that public policy can fill.
Yes, that's one. To humanize that, I'll just plug the fact that while I was pregnant with my child, my mother fell and broke her leg and moved in with us. And I was having this terrible balance of like, I can't take FMLA to take care of her because I'm going to have a baby and I need it then. So it's a real life challenge.
Yeah.
Will employers get reimbursed for their current parental leave offerings? I guess if this public policy passes, and then how would that process work?
So this is something that's very much undecided and a topic of conversation. There are a couple of different policy blueprints that are out there. The Neal plan, which is Richie Neal is the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. His is the first piece of legislation that creates a pathway for employers to get some reimbursement for leave that they're already providing or choose to provide. But this is very undetermined, and it's perhaps one reason for employers to start getting involved in policy design. I do think that there would, as a policy advocate and as someone who wants to see clarity and uniformity in benefits for workers or certainty in benefits, I would want to make sure that any reimbursement that was going to companies was for leave that met certain standards. And I would say right now, some of you may know, but maybe some of you don't, the tax code actually does include small tax credits for employers that are offering paid leave to median salary level workers, $72,000 or less. This was passed as part of the 2017 Republican tax bill. It was extended, it goes through 2025, but the uptake of this has been very low, and there's actually not any evidence that it's increased access to paid leave. And in fact, if you look at the aggregate data, if you go back to one of the first slides that I presented, access to paid leave has increased much more among high wage workers in that 2018 to 2020 period when that tax credit was available than it has among lower wage workers. And access to temporary disability insurance didn't increase at all. In fact, it went down for the lowest wage workers. So that would suggest that the tax credits alone are not effective. And that's part of the reason why we need a federal program that's there for everyone, regardless of what employers are doing.
All right, and then we have one more question right now, unless anyone wants to add anything in the chat section. But this question is, in your estimation, what is the likelihood that a federal paid leave policy will be enacted during this administration?
A great question, and that would be, reading tea leaves. But I think it's very encouraging that the Biden administration has prioritized this. House and Senate leaders Pelosi and Schumer have committed to this. The chairman of the 2 relevant committees of jurisdiction and the chairman of the budget and health committees, in addition to finance and ways and means, are committed to this. So I think the chances are better than ever before. But I also think we're living in very uncertain political times, and forces much bigger than this one issue could make everything sort of uncertain. But I'm optimistic, as I think I mentioned. I've been working on this since 2010, in a pretty dedicated way, and I think we are by far sort of all of the pieces are moving in a better direction than ever before. And I think if we're going to win this policy, it will be this year.
All right, Sarah, well, that is all the questions we have, so I'll pass it back to you.
I just want to thank you again, Vicki. Thank you for sharing all these important points with us, giving your insight and perspective on where we are with paid leave legislation right now. It's absolutely, such a hot button issue. Employers and caregivers alike are interested in kind of what is going to come down. So we appreciate your insight and you taking the time with us this morning. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Like I said, we will circle back with everybody with the recording for this session, a key takeaways page, and that'll have your email on it as well, Vicki. So if people want to reach out to you, that'll be a good way for them to do it. And so the last piece is just we'll see you all on August 31 at 11 a.m. Central. We're going to provide a recap of all of the sessions in the series in a 1-hour session on August 31 at 11. This will be a time where you can catch up on any of the talking points of the sessions that you missed. It's going to be by invitation only, and there will be a special benefit bump gift mailed to each attendee of the recap event. We're very excited about it. So we will see you all then. Vicki, thank you so much.
Thank you. And yeah, I definitely welcome folks to get in touch. So thanks.
Yep, we'll make sure they have access to your email address so that they can do that.
Thank you.
Have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thanks for joining. Bye-bye.